Okay, ladies, I'm going to give you an overview of the Sterifeed Pasteuriser and how it works with pasteurising the donor breast milk to make it safe for the babies on the unit. This is the pasteuriser. It comprises a tank. You can come and have a look. No sort of rivets or any traps or water traps in that tank because over the years of use, really the only treatment you want for cleaning this up is basically to dry it out after every use properly, and that way it won't have any bacterial growth. And if it's thoroughly dry, it can be left to air and then the lid closed when it's thoroughly aired, and then there's no sort of massive clean-up issue unless there's some spillage or something like that of milk, in which case it's normal rules apply. So the tank is very straightforward, and the bottle baskets go into the tank for the pasteurisation. Everything on the pasteuriser is controlled with this little panel down here. It tells you how to stop it, how to start it, and it's a fairly simple operation. It tells you at what phase the pasteurisation is at any point in time. So if you leave the room for half an hour and come back, you can see where you're at and how much longer you've got before the cycle is going to finish. The pasteuriser treats the breast milk by heating it to 62.5 degrees for 30 minutes. That's the standard, and then it has to rapidly chill the milk to prevent any problems with bacterial regrowth and so on. And the benchmarks for that are down to 25 degrees in less than 10 minutes, and then down to 10 degrees in 30 minutes, but this takes it down to about 4 degrees at the finish of the cycle, so it's ready to go back into the freezer. That chilling phase is quite hard work for a machine, and is part of the reason that the Sterifeed Pasteuriser sort of ticks all the boxes from the safety point of view. There aren't any others that do the heating and the chilling part. So, how do we go? You start the pasteuriser with the lid closed, empty, nothing in. Press start. I'm not going to do this. And the pasteuriser fills. It fills up with a small amount of water from the hot, and it starts to heat the water. And the water heats up to about 63 degrees, and then it buzzes at me, put the milk in. So I've got my little data logger, and I'll tell you what that's for in a minute. It is part and parcel with this little probe that's in one of the bottles. It's in a control bottle of water, not milk, because you don't want to waste the milk, and you also don't want the clean up. So you've got a control bottle of water. The probe sits in that. It sits in the basket, and its job is to tell you what the milk is experiencing, what's happening to the milk in the water bath. And so my bottles are saying, my pasteuriser is saying put me in. I open up my lid. I've got swirling hot water in there at the moment at 63 degrees or so. And I put in this case, full basket bottle baskets, but it could be, I could have 10 bottles in here. I could have big bottles in here. These are the small bottles. It's a variety. It takes up to about 9 litres per run. So when you're in the early days, you might be pasteurising 3 litres, 4 litres infrequently, and that could be going up to some of the milk banks in Australia are pasteurising daily 9 litres. You know, so it just depends on what your demand is on the unit from the babies and how many mums aren't able to give their own breast milk. Okay. So I now close the lid, and I'm going to connect my logger, my data logger, which I've set going on the computer, set my batch data in there, and I'm going to put that and connect that to the machine with this little connector. And sorry, I should have connected it first. And then I'm going to connect my probe that's in the bottle to the machine as well. So now the machine is reading what's happening in the bottle. It's feeding that information to the logger, which displays on the front what's happening in the bottle. So it's telling me the temperature of the bottle on the front of this logger. Meanwhile, my control panel is telling me the temperature of the bath and what stage I'm at. So I've now put an awful lot of cold stuff into a small hot water bath, fills up with water and starts to heat again. It's got to kick in the heater. Now, I'm not allowed to open the lid, but obviously I will for this purpose. The water comes up to just above the lids of the bottles. So there's a little pressure feeler in here, a transducer that monitors the level of the water. It has to come up above the level of the bottles because you've got to treat any milk droplets that are in the cap of the bottle. Everything has to be treated that's in the bottle, heat treated. So I haven't really looked in there, but that water's now swirling around and it's reheating up to pasteurisation temperature. When it hits pasteurisation temperature, and that means when the bottle is at 62.5, it now pasteurises for 30 minutes, okay? Then drains. All the hot water comes out and leaves, again, I'm not looking in there, an empty bath. The water fills back up with cold, and there's an ice bank that's built up in this machine. This is a new system for chilling. It's a more eco system. It uses much less energy. It's used the heating phase to start building an ice bank, and it now is going to use that to help with the chilling. We'll just cut the chilling down by quite a lot. In the chilling phase, the water comes back up, but only to the neck of the bottle, because these bottles aren't sealed against the vacuum. You know, there's that vacuum effect that can happen. And if you had the cold water above the bottles and they're being rapidly chilled, it could try and suck water into the bottles. So if somebody hadn't put one lid on completely, that could happen. So it only comes up, the water comes up to the neck of the bottle, and it proceeds to chill. When it's finished chilling and the logger saying it's 4 degrees or so, this is running at about 1 degree, the water in here. It stops, drains, buzzes, says I'm finished. So all in all, woe to go, it's about 90 minutes, maybe a little longer. Yeah. Depends on the temperature of your water coming in. If your hot's too cold and if your cold's too warm, it can take a bit longer, okay? So it's finished. I open it up. I take out my baskets of pasteurised chilled milk. So now this is running at 4, these are at 4 degrees. I have got a wet bath at this point, you know, it's sort of wet around condensation and so on around the edges here. And then I can take these, I can take out my sample and I can put the others in the freezer of pasteurised milk awaiting the results from microbiology.
So just one sample from both batches? You just take...
Well, they're not necessarily batches. I could have 1 mum's milk here, I could have
so it's just a
5 mums. That is to be determined, actually. Yes, that's one of the things that you're determining at the moment. Yes, good question. I then take out my logger. And I take it over to the computer. I dock it by just popping it. There's a little cradle over there. I pop it in the cradle. It reads the data. And I look at the data and see if the milk has been treated properly. So the logger is monitoring what happens to the bottle, and that is a proof of treatment. If it's hit the 62.5 for 30 minutes and chilled rapidly within the time frame required, then basically you say it's a successful pasteurisation run. Because pasteurisation is proven over many years, you just have to prove that the pasteuriser did that what you wanted to the milk on that day. Okay, that's what you're monitoring there. And with the microbiology, of course, you're monitoring whether mum who donated the milk had good hygiene when she donated. If the bacterial count's too high pre-pasteurisation, then the milk gets discarded post-pasteurisation because you haven't got the results back yet. It takes a couple of days for the results, and you have to have those to decide what to do with the milk. If everything's fine for the bacterial count pre, then basically you've got good milk and it's ready to go to babies. And then you just feed. I don't know how you'd worked out how you're going to feed the babies. I mean, that'll evolve over the next few months, but it will just be targeted at those that need it most, usually first, and the very low birth weight, and then it tends to flourish. But then often the hospitals get to a point where you have to start bringing the parameters back. So they say, oh, I'll feed up to 38 weeks, or now I can only feed up to 36 weeks because I've not got enough milk, and I'm feeding, it could be 10 babies a day, 15. Yes, I mean, some of them are getting up to 30, 38 babies a day, some of the really large units. Yeah, so it just depends on your babies and how many mums are able to feed their own, of course.
So when you put that on the computer and it reads out, if it read out and something was wrong, you would discard the pasteurising that you've done?
No, you can repasteurize. Yeah, you can repasteurize, but you'd have to do it that day, of course, because you're thinking breast milk again. It's been out of the fridge now for 12 hours and out of the freezer for 12 hours. So you're just thinking within your breast milk parameters, yes.
Does the program on the computer highlight any problems, or do you just know?
No, it doesn't highlight problems because these little devices, they're very widely used devices, very accurate temperature measurers, used in a variety of industries, from mining through to food processing. So you see a graph line, and then you see a whole set of numbers. I'm recording every minute. You can record every second if you want, but that would be extremely tedious. So you record every minute, and you say, oh yes, look, there it is, 62, and you count, and you say, yep, that's fine. So it takes you maybe 1 minute to decide that cycle's fine, thanks very much. And then you're ready to go. And so you would do that after each run before you go to the, before you, But saying that, if you are waylaid, something has to happen and you need to leave the room, you would put the milk in the freezer. You'd go, and you can come back to this 2 hours later if you needed to. This isn't controlling you. It's just the fact that you want to verify before you confirm. Exactly right. Any other questions? All straightforward. So it's a pretty simple to use machine. It's very simple to use. It does most of the thinking. You don't need to be in the room at the time. You only need to be in the room about 15 minutes after you start it. But in that time, you're preparing the bottles anyway and getting everything ready. And so in that 15 minutes is filled.
If there's a power outage or something?
Well, they're on an essential supply. If there was a power outage and you weren't on an essential supply, it would drain. It would cut out, and you'd have to repasteurize. Yeah, that's why it's on an essential supply. What else? Yeah, basically plumbed in down there like a dishwasher. It's pretty straightforward. Everything around it is designed to be straightforward. Everything just to make it easy to maintain and so on, and the usability. At any point in time, this is telling you what's happening. It goes through the various phases: bath warming, put bottles in, bottles warming, pasteurising, chilling. So you can come in, you've been outside, you come in at a glance, you know where it's at, and you're ready to go.
If it was a fault with the machine, anything other than no power, would it just automatically drain? And how would you treat the milk that was halfway through the process?
Yeah, I didn't. So if there was a fault and it wasn't because there was a power outage, what would happen to the milk? Okay, that's a very good question. The machine would drain. It would tell you on the front here what the fault was. It would make a large buzzing noise and call you to attention. And meanwhile, the milk is sitting. I don't know what phase this has happened at. So if it was in the heating phase, the milk would be sitting in this tank, no water but still hot. If it was the chilling phase, it would be sitting in this tank, no water but still cold. It's a reasonably well sealed tank, so it would probably be sitting at a temperature for a bit of time. I can't really say because it's a movable feast, but it could be sitting there for 10 minutes, 20 minutes, at a reasonable, reasonably at the same temperature. You'd come in, say you'd left the room, and you would see what the fault was. It could be a no-fill fault, and you realise that somebody fiddled and turned one of the taps off, which wouldn't happen, but that could happen. So you'd sort the fault out, you take the milk out, you put it back in the fridge, and then you get ready to repasteurize once you'd sorted out what had happened. Oh yes.
It's not bad for milk if it's half pasteurised, then chilled, then frozen, then warmed up.
No, it's not actually. It makes very little difference. I think once it's been frozen, it's done what it's going to do as frozen milk. Once it's been chilled, it's done what it's going to do. All you're trying to do is make sure you don't encourage any bacterial regrowth. Yeah, that's it.
So warming twice is not going to do
No. Anything else?
That's good, and it's just about sampling the random.
Oh, yes. Well, they haven't decided. I mean, from the point of view of pre-pasteurisation, the sample will be taken from. Are you going to do that, Anthea? Oh, yes. So
you get all your milk,
Yes.
pool it
Yes.
from one mother,
from one mother, 2 litres,
Yeah.
pool it, take your sample. So that's
and then you
five
decant into
mils.
bottles. So this is my 5 mils that goes to the lab.
Right. Okay.
Pre-pasteurisation, and if I've got 2 mums' milks here, you've got 2 samples going on.
Oh, right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then we haven't worked out the
Then
post.
you decant into
Yes.
one or the other,
Sorry.
whatever you'd like to do.
Yes.
Goes in there,
Yeah.
is pasteurised, and then we just have a little bit of a, not sure whether to make it from each mum or just
Random.
a random one.
Yeah.
We haven't decided.
Is the milk separated up into colostrum and mature milk, or is that?
We'll try and keep them separate because colostrum is a different purpose.
And generally, people do try and, certainly in the early stages, wherever possible, try and match gestational age milk. And you'll know that because you'll get to know, the milk bank will get to know the mums, if you know what I mean. And so you'll get your matching as best as you can, knowing who you know and what you've got.
So the matching will be done here, will it be done clinically?
That I can't tell you.
It's quite tricky, isn't it, to match
If you make
donor to recipient?
We will have it on the computer, so we will try, but who knows?
No.
If you have a short supply, you can only give what you've got.
It's
not like you're going to have that.
It isn't a science. It's
no.
basically it's food, and it's not a science. And people aim for a standard, get it most of the time, and other times have to break that standard, but still are giving breast milk. That's right. Yeah. So it is one of those things where it's common sense, really. Anything else? I think there's no anecdotal evidence so that people are using that in preference to their own milk, and I think it may be the worry that they might have to fall back on formula. That's possibly playing into the question. Oh, but what if I can't? This doesn't improve. Am I going to have to get into that situation? I suspect, but there isn't any anecdotal evidence that people are being. Australia's I only have Australian detailed knowledge. I have worldwide, but Australian detailed knowledge, and it's very high breastfeeding rate in Australia, and mum's own milk rate. Obviously, it's not always breastfed, but yeah. So there doesn't seem to be any problem with that.